manager, like, it never occurred to me that I had to say, well, I want to do something else, or I need to be promoted. Like, my 5-year plan is X. This is where I see myself. Because if you don't do that, they're not going to give it to you. You know, looking back, I probably would have been, I might have been more successful, possibly, had I known that.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Against All Odds. My name is Daniel Coker, your regular host. Our guest this week is someone I've known for over 14 years in a professional capacity. She is a managing director and also the global head of tax for Cantor Fitzgerald, which is a global interdealer brokerage, and she's based in New York. And she's someone who is very inspirational to me. I know, because I've known her for many years. And she doesn't have just one master's, but she actually has 2 masters. She's a CPA, a certified public accountant, and she's a wife and a mother to 2 lovely daughters. So Cynthia, welcome to our podcast.
Thank
you. But before we kick off, I just want to say, for those of you who are watching for the first time, that this podcast is something that I initiated roughly 3 months ago by accident, and it's purely a diversity and inclusion initiative, you know, where we capture stories of people who have managed to get to the top in their various fields of endeavor. And Cynthia definitely fits that bill.
I have more to go, right? Like, I'm not at the top yet, but you know, I still have a ways to go.
Well. So Cynthia, tell us your story.
I guess, where do you want to start? Like, from college?
Okay,
like,
so basically, I know that you're originally from your parents are originally from Guyana.
Mm-hmm.
So they migrated to the United Kingdom. You were born in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
And yeah, so maybe from there.
Oh gosh, I think we left here, I must have been about 2
Okay.
years old, and I think honestly, and being like fully transparent, I think at that time in the 70s, it was a little harder for them.
Okay.
And I think they felt the whole objective, right, for them moving was so I wouldn't be born anywhere in South America, right? Because of like education and opportunity and everything, right? Mm-hmm. So coming here, I think in their mind they were like, okay, you're born here, and I got the passport.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
So back then they used to
it used to work that way.
Used to attach, right? So, you know, they couldn't take that away from me, right? And that was like a big thing, because I think at the time, my dad's perspective was I could always come and go to school here.
Here, okay.
Right? With being UK citizen, right? And they'd figure out their status somehow. Right? And then I think like it was difficult for work and things like that, and it's funny because what they had said was like the racism here back then was so hard, but in America, like it's much more, right? So like I think they didn't know that really, right? Okay. So and it was easier to go to school and things like that for my dad, right? Because my dad, oddly, a little known fact, he was actually going for a degree in accounting.
Oh, really?
So it's so funny, right, that I ended up like going that way eventually, right, with some like stubbornness, I guess, right? And then we came to the States, and my dad finally got like visa, right, and then got us, visa, and then eventually, like I think my dad was in the States for like a year or so, and left my mom and me here. And then eventually we came over, and granted we weren't documented, right? So it was like super hard, right? Like I can't even imagine like doing that now, with my own children, right? Like going like and like like the unknown, no family, no support really, no money either. They had no money, to come here, right? So, because they had no money. Like, they had no one to give them money, right, from back home or anything, right? So, when you look at that, and then again, the objective was always that, for me to go to school, right? And eventually, with time, like, my parents became successful at what they were doing and everything. And then with that, like, I was, right? And
so you're an only child? Or?
I'm an only child, yeah.
Oh,
I'm an only child.
Right, okay. Okay. So a lot of the decisions were centered around your well-being.
Even today. I'm almost 45, and I feel like being an only child, it's always about me, right? And
so what was it like growing up in your home? Because I haven't met your dad, and actually I'm coming to the US in a few weeks. And,
okay.
Yeah, you didn't know that. I'm actually coming to the US in a couple of weeks. And one of the things I've always kind of wanted, because we go back a long way, and you've always spoken about your dad and his entrepreneurial activities. I've never met him, but I have this picture of him in my head,
Yeah, my dad always worked. That's how, I knew he was always working. 2 jobs, 3 jobs, always working,
really?
Always supporting us. Yeah, 7 days a week, because he wanted to buy a house. Right, because when we moved from here, we lived in the Bronx, and it wasn't the best neighborhood. Okay. The other thing too, my parents had me in Catholic school, so they had to pay for that, right? So you got to think undocumented, trying to get green card, paying for school, doing all these things that's kind of unconventional, right? Because not to say that back then that people didn't put their kids in Catholic school, but they were more affluent, a little bit, right? They had a little bit more money than my parents, right? Okay. And I remember, my mom telling me, the stories of people would almost question, you pay for her to go there. You know what I mean? You pay that much for her just to go to school. Okay. When she can go to public school, and my mother was no, she needs to go to that because it's better. It was better education, right? Okay. So then eventually we moved to Queens. I must have been 11, 12 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that's where we've been. We're still there. We're still in Queens. And yeah, it was just that work ethic that my dad, has, because he still has it. Yeah. I've never seen him, you know what I mean, when I was growing up. Yeah, not working, you know what I mean? And it was stressful.
So, and I'm not saying this, to flatter you or anything, but I mean, you're one of the most intelligent people that I've ever come across. Were you intelligent in school? Because
fairly, I was always, because you gotta understand too, coming from immigrant parents, you can't bring, okay, let's say there was extra credit on a test, right? Yeah. And it was an extra 10 points, and you got 100, and right? And you're like, what happened to the 10 points? And it was always that expectation, right? The expectation was always from my parents that you have to do better than us. Okay. You have to have the education. The other thing too is the whole family, in general, especially my aunt and my cousins are gonna probably giggle because they're gonna know which aunt it is when I say this. Okay. You can take away your money, you can take away your clothes, you can take away anything, but you can't take away your education. Right. Okay. No one can ever take that from you. Okay. That's something that's ingrained at birth, right? Education. Okay. And then I guess kind of skipping around. Then eventually, I had to go to college, right? So
was this all privately educated or?
Yeah, so I went to St. John's University, and that's you get some financial aid, but it's a Catholic private college. Oh. So it's a little bit more pricey back then too. Okay. Now it's still pricey, but it was in Queens, and over the time, in going there, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, right? Okay. So, and they have a big pre-law program. So I went in for, I want to say English, right? And then I was like, I don't know if I want to be a lawyer. Because at the time, just like it is now, there were so many lawyers and no one were getting jobs, right? And that's the same thing now, right? what's the use of a lawyer, right? Yeah. And I was worried because... you gotta understand, my perspective growing up was always, you have to have money, you have to have stability, you have to have a job. Okay. Right? Okay. So in my mind, after I graduated, I had to get a job. Okay. See what I mean? Yeah. That was just it.
That was it.
Right.
That was it, yeah.
So at the time, the whole, .com thing was coming, right? Y2K was coming, everything. And people, in the late 90s, right, were just, killing. NASDAQ was crazy, right, in the market. Yeah. So I was like, you know what? Let me go do that. Okay. And do computer science, right?
Ah, I was going to ask you that.
That's why. Okay. So I was like, you're going to get a job. It's going to be fine. Because financial services, every industry was turning on its head for technology, right? Okay. The internet had come out already, right? Yeah, everybody had AOL. Right. You know what I mean? I'm dating myself, but like I just remember like the little man, with the AOL thing, and even just coding. Like I mean, I learned like basic. With COBOL, like these are things that don't exist now, right? Like I had a Palm Pilot, like no one, like
who was a Palm Pilot?
Yeah, when I was like, oh man, I had a Palm Pilot, I had all my little things or whatever, and then I came in to be like a systems analyst, right? So,
in Goldman's.
Yeah. Okay. So and it was entry level, like super entry level, like.
Okay, so again, just to pause there because you must have been pretty clued up for you to have been chosen by Goldman.
No, not really. It was luck. I knew I wanted to work at Goldman, right? From when I was in St. John's, but it didn't work out that way, like in terms of recruiting. So I took a temp job.
Oh.
So when I graduated, so call it I graduated like May, right? Yeah. And then I went to back then. That's the other thing. This one, he's going to be like, why? Like, to find a job, you have to look in the newspaper.
Right, okay.
Right? So I remember, looking in the newspaper and the New York Times on a Sunday, because that was like when all the jobs would come out, right? Okay. And there was this temp agency, and literally I had to call them, right? And I had to fax them my resume, that's right? Which is like unheard of, right? I didn't even have a resume. Like, what kind of resume did I really have?
Yeah.
And like my resume was it was funny because I always worked when I was in college too.
Okay.
Like let's not get crazy. It wasn't like full time, but it was always like from children's plays to Kinko's to then I finally like at the tail end of college I worked in like a doctor's office. So I did like the afternoon hours, right? And I was like the receptionist there, and I did some bookkeeping and things like that for them.
Okay.
And when I ended up like going to Goldman, the lady was like, okay, I have a temp job, right? And you're gonna have to work hourly, right? Okay. And you're gonna have to do like a timesheet, and the timesheet was this little pink thing, right? And I just had to put my hours like eight, and then I had to fax that to her, right? Every week in order for me to get paid.
Right.
And then I want to say that was like the summer, and then I was still looking for a job, because I'd already graduated. Mm-hmm. And the market kind of started to slump a little bit in 2000. Yeah. Right. So I said, I forget where did I get the job? Lehman. Okay. I got an offer at Lehman. And Bear Stearns. Okay. Which is so funny. Like, I was like, oh, good thing I didn't take that. So, and I told my boss at the time. Okay. Which is funny, right? Because looking back at it, as soon as I told her, she got me an offer to come into the class. Yeah. Okay. She made me like permanent instantly, like within like a week. I was like, oh, I'm gonna resign. And she's like, why? And I'm like, so my point to that is, right, when like now hindsight being 2020, like they always knew that I was okay.
Right, okay.
Right?
Okay.
But they never offered you, for me to like,
permanent.
Right. Yeah. And even though the analyst class was coming in, right, at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I say that because I look back at it and I'm like, I always wonder if I should have put it out there that I was looking for a job, because I think like my relationship with my VP, she didn't realize that I was interviewing with the other banks, or that I wanted to work in the other banks. She just thought that I was just going to be a consultant, because she looked at me as a tech consultant. You see what I mean? Okay. That this was like a temporary job, and then I just move on to another project somewhere else. Right. Okay. Like no idea, right? Because I remember when she said it, she was like the really, like, you got, why? What are you doing? And I was like, and then it kind of just began. And then 9/11 happened, and everyone, in technology, right? Like, all these people, like, it didn't matter, right, anymore. Right. Like, we weren't, at that time, like, probably, like, November after 9/11, we weren't, if you weren't the lifeline of the company, like, a revenue producer or, like, a necessity, right, for accounting, they laid off hundreds and hundreds of people on Wall Street. Yeah, it was big layoffs. And the thing was, too, like, at that time, they started doing not offshoring, but starting moving things into other areas, like Texas, right? It was one. Even like some like HR functions, like that's how India started. Back then, like operations, things like that, Philippines, all that. Yeah. So then I was like, crap. Like initially, it's like I need a job, was kind of the thought process. But I was studying for the GMAT anyway. The GMAT's to get into for MBA school, right?
Okay.
And I was like going through that process when I got laid off anyway.
Right. Okay.
So I said, you know what? Like my mom was saying, like, just keep going, and you just stay in the basement, and you can stay here, and that's it, right? And and just keep with that process. And if you get a job, you get a job. If you don't, you finish your education, right?
Right.
So I went for an MBA, and I didn't at the time. I think like I wanted like an MBA in finance, right? And that was like I was applying for that, and I got into some big schools, right, for finance. And this, I forget who the woman was, but somebody had told me, go into accounting, because if you go into accounting, you'll get a job. Because Big Four would always hire, is always hiring. The other thing too, like you could switch to finance later.
Right.
With accounting, you have like a hard skill, because you can read financials, you can get your CPA, you have things, right? You can always go into finance later. Whereas like finance was like they'd have to pick you to fit into these roles, right? Versus me just saying I'm accounting, right? So then, now you're gonna get into how
and you'd never done accounting before?
Well, yes and no. I never practiced accounting, but the system I was building for Goldman was an accounting system.
Right.
I was the liaison between the accounting group and IT, right? And writing out the specifications. So I had to understand how the system was going to spit out certain debits and credits and things like that, right? So I was like, all right, I can do this. Like these guys, like I can do it. They can do it, right? Like no big deal. And it was so funny because I initially like to sit for the exam, not sit to get your license. I think back then you needed like 2 years of audit or something like that. So I had thought I was gonna go do audit, right? Not like I went to class and I was like, I can't do this for a living. Like I can't do audit ever. And I had one of my very, very best friends. She was in tax, and I had met her at Goldman, and we're still like super close. And she was like, go into tax. She's like, because you'll always have like something to do. And the thing about it was like, you in companies, like you're like every transaction, right, where you would be involved in, like you get involved with the business more and everything. So I said, okay. So I went into tax, and the other thing too, because she was still at Goldman, and E&Y, was the one, not auditing, doing the tax services for them. She was like, I can probably get you a job at EY, right? Because you were here and I can put in a work for you. So that was set. So like instantly, like maybe like a year in, like I already was settled with E&Y. EY was going to hire me, done, right? Because I had worked on those same funds and they had liked me. So, and because of her, like truthfully, like she put in. And when I finished, and then I was taking the CPA exam, got that through, and then I was at E&Y. And when I got to E&Y, it was funny because all I did was tax returns. Like heavy tax returns. I'm talking like I worked on real estate funds. I was in the real estate group, and it was like 24/7. Like busy season was like I was like so shocked at how many hours like busy season was, right? And I didn't want to do tax returns because it wasn't like my thing. And I wanted the other thing too. Every person that I know that goes into Big Four that goes and the desire is always I want to do international tax. Right? Because it's like the sexy tax, right? Like, oh, you get to structure, you don't really have to deal with the numbers like that, right? And of course, me, I was doing the same thing, right? And I had a mentor who I'm still very close with, Sean Haley, and he picked me up on his engagement. He's also African American. So, and he picked me up when nobody would take me on engagements for international tax. And he taught me, like, honestly, like how to like have like a U.S. company with foreign subsidiaries to be able to do like that kind of transaction. And I remember. Like now I look back and I actually saw him not too long ago. I was laughing. I was like, he was the one that taught me how to, tax. If it wasn't for Sean, like I don't think I would have been this grounded in tax.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And he had left and he took a position in DC. To basically almost like help write the tax code in a way, right? So when he had left, I was still at E&Y, and then Lehman had happened. Right, that crash and everything. And then, they had the Big Four across the board had laid off again, right? I didn't get laid off, but then I got more work, right? So, like, come busy season, it was like, okay, you know how to do tax returns. Right. You come and help, like, real estate to do these tax returns. Oh, okay. Come and do provision and come and do some help with some tax structuring. Okay. And it was a lot, like, because I was a senior. I was right at manager. Mm-hmm. That was my promotion year. Okay. And one day, headhunters always call, but this one day, like, I was so spent, like, I was beside myself. Mm-hmm. And the headhunter called, and I was like, oh, you know, there's like, I got a job. Would you be interested? Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know, what is it? I had no idea what GFI was. Mm-hmm. Nothing. It was just back on Wall Street, like, all of that. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And it was still, I was going through with my promotion. So I did get promoted, like, that summer. Like, they were telling me, like, you know, I was getting promoted and everything. And reviews were going on, everything like that. And I gave notice. But it was so funny because I gave notice the same day Michael Jackson died. Oh, okay. And I always remember because everybody was like, okay, like, Michael Jackson died. Like, no one cared I gave notice, right? Like, it was like no big, like, I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. And, you know, you only back then, like, you only had to give like 2 weeks, right? Because I was a senior, so I didn't have to stay there long. And then I went to GFI. And I went to GFI because the people that I was interviewing with, this particular, you remember Connor McCarthy? Yeah, I do, yeah. So he had said to me, you want to come to a place like this, you can learn everything soup to nuts. Okay. Right? And you understand how the GL works and all that. Because remember now, Sarbanes-Oxley came in. Yeah. So we couldn't do, like, you know, the ledger and things like that. Yeah. We couldn't do all the bookkeeping in at Big Four. Okay. So he's like, you have to learn how that works and how everything works. And then you can probably go back to public accounting and be partner. Okay. You know, eventually, but now you're going to be able to client serve in a different way, right? Because you were on the public side and then you went to private and now you're going back, you know, as a true advisor. Yeah. So, like, 14 years later, because I was always leaving to go to public. Okay. Like, I've had many conversations, like, to go to public accounting, like, and they approach me even now, like, the conversation comes up, and it's just, it never worked out that way, you know, with all the transactions and all the things that I've been involved with. I've never been bored. Okay. You know, and now, like, at this job, I'm never bored. It's like, I always have, like, plenty to do. But,
So did you ever see yourself as being in the position that you are, you know, sitting in the Wall Street boardroom? I mean, did you ever see yourself at this level? And you're relatively young as well. I mean, you've been there for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
So a few things that are wrong with you. I mean, you're a woman. You're not what do you call it? You're from an ethnic minority from Guyana. You know, and all these things which, you know, you don't normally see people of your sort of background or ethnicity manage to get into
especially
that
like
level.
The way that I look too, right? It's like like you do tax, like, you know what I mean? I'm there. Like,
and actually, you know, just tell us the story about what happened. One of the places you work, you know, where, you know, somebody asked you.
Oh gosh, yeah. So that story. So Danny and I were talking about, like, when, like, I said to him, I didn't know I was different till I got to work. Right. And what I mean by that is, like, I remember distinctly being in a meeting, and I was all of, like, 21 years old. Okay. And this senior, he was probably, like, on his way to retire, to be candid. And back then, like, there was none of this that they have now, where, like, you know, you get in trouble with HR for saying things or whatever. And he was like, Cynthia, where are you from? You're very tribal looking. And I remember, and, like, one of the VPs, like, he looked like he turned, like, green, like, and came up to me and was like, Cynthia, do you want to, you know, do anything? He's like, I feel so bad, you know. Okay. And I didn't really, like, I just was like, oh, this is an older man just being himself. Yeah. And I was like, oh, you know, and you know, I didn't think anything of it, right? And, like, it would keep happening, right? Because that's the other thing too. Like, I find with schools, when they recruit, especially in to me, like in New York or major cities, right? There's so many of us, right? Okay. And then when you get to work, there's none of us.
Right. Okay.
Right, and when the firms come to recruit, all of us go to recruit, right? Okay. But then when they come to work on these engagements, like I could tell you, EY was like, it was exactly that. When I was even there, we would go to recruit, you know, minorities in particular. Yeah. And it would be all of us recruiting them, right? Coming to say, like, come see you, come work. Yeah. And then when they got to work, we weren't around. Because we were on, because you don't realize how few of us there are.
Oh, right,
so the perception, right? Okay. Like I always wondered, like the perception of students, right? Mm-hmm. They must have thought like, oh, we're super diverse in corporate America.
Right. Okay.
But the reality was no, right? Mm-hmm. And it was hard, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember like students like complaining, behind that. Mm-hmm. And what I'll tell you is, I never thought, it was at different times that I thought I would be here.
Okay.
Right? So, like, when I went to EY, I never thought I was going to be a global head of tax.
Okay.
Until I went private, right? And then when I, it's kind of like childhood, right? Okay. You're always going up. Mm-hmm. You never stop moving, right? You never, like, your ambition, drive, all of that, that's something that your parents give you.
Okay.
They have to give it to you. If they don't, then you don't, in my experience, you don't have it, right? Unless, like, you're an outlier, right? But like you have to be bred that way. And I think like in every place it was always like I want to get promoted to the next place, right? I want the next position above me, right? I've always been that way. So I think like by the time when I was at GFI, like I was a manager, I got I went to senior manager, and then when my boss quit, I was like I want it.
Okay.
I was like, I was good enough for it, right? Okay. Now, this place here, that's not so much. Like, I didn't, but then eventually, like, within a year, I was like, I want this role.
Okay.
And, just like you said, it was never, like, a thought back when I was younger. Like, oh, I want to do tax and I want to be, like, a tax accountant. No. It was along the way that it came. But it was always...
But you've always, like, as you said, I've known you a long time. You've always been... a go-getter. I've never known you to shy away from taking on responsibility, and you've always had this inner drive, which you're saying seems to have been instilled in you from
my parents. Oh my God!
Parents,
like you can't even like sit down in the house, like when you were little, like it was like, why are you sitting down? Like, there's things to do, like, you gotta go clean, you gotta go do something,
Would you say? I mean, what prepared you for the level that you're at now?
Time and experience, and I've been fortunate, honestly, to have mentors. Okay. I think the other thing that not a detriment to my parents, right? Okay. Not that way, but my parents didn't teach me corporate America.
Okay.
Coming in, and a lot of minorities, I see it, even when I mentor. Mm-hmm. You don't think how do I say? When like immigrants come, right, to a country, what they think is I gotta work and put my head down, and I'll get promoted. That's the thought. Like my parents, I can tell you, like I'll get the money.
Okay.
Right, they'll give it to me.
Okay.
The thought process of corporate America is like it's a strategy. That's a whole other job. Okay. So you have your job, and then you have your strategy on how you're going to get to the next level. Okay. And that means, like, you have to identify people. You have to find mentors. No one's going to find you.
Right, okay.
And that I had to learn, probably I'd say at E&Y more so than anything. I think getting laid off from Goldman, like, I took it personal. Like, it broke my heart, right? Like, when I got laid off from Goldman, and I think... going in, I was like, this isn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, too, like, I looked at people, and I looked at, like, my majority counterparts. Okay. And how some of them weren't necessarily bright. Okay. But they were in these roles.
They were able to play the game.
But I didn't know what that game was, right? I didn't know there was a game, right? Like, I just thought you do a good job, you give your deliverables, right? That's it, right? Like, you don't have to have, like, the conversation.
The soft skills.
Right, but even, like, in promotions, right? Or while you're talking to your manager, like, it never occurred to me that I had to say, well, I want to do something else. Okay. Or I need to be promoted. Like, my 5-year plan is X. This is where I see myself. Because if you don't do that... they're not going to give it to you. Okay. You see what I mean? So, like, that became, like, a whole, like, new area that, networking. Like, it wasn't, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't understand the networking, right? Like, too, because it was, I was different, why would they mentor me? Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Like that. So I would, and somebody had said this to me, when you looking for a mentor, it has to be organic. Okay. Right? But you have to trick them into making it organic because people won't say no.
Okay.
So if you ask them to do something, generally people will help you.
Okay.
Right? And it's true. Okay. It honestly is true, and I tell people this all the time, like even mentees, look for me. Okay. If you look for me and you ask me a question, I need to pick your brain on XYZ, naturally I would say eventually I'll get to you.
Right, okay.
Right? Okay. And especially if you have something to offer.
Okay.
Like, I can help you do this. Do you have something I can do? That's a different skill set too.
Okay.
To do. Okay. I think and a lot of, and we're just not taught that as a culture, as a community.
As a community, okay.
We're not taught that. We're not taught to be like a little submissive. Yeah. To be like, can I get you something?
Yeah.
Can I, you know what I mean? Yeah. Hi, I'm Cynthia. Like, can I get you a drink? Okay. Those things like matter, right?
Yeah, but they do, don't they?
And I never knew that, right? Okay. And it was like over time, and I probably, looking back, I might have been more successful, possibly, had I known that, because I had to learn along the way, right? Like, that's what it was, right? Yeah. And I had to, watch people, but my thing was always, there were always people, there's always office politics, there were always politics when it came around to promotions, because there were people who weren't as technical as the other person, right. But they were, like, all over the place, right? And, and making a lot of money. Right? That's another thing too. Like, I find like now there's like this is no offense to you. This is like, I find like the generations now don't want to make money like that. Yeah. They want the money, but they don't really want the money, right? Whereas like I think us coming up, it was always like
it was the number one thing.
Right. Yeah. Like, you have to have money, right? You have to have money, and it's because we didn't have it that we just we would try to find ways to get it. So I mean I never thought like I would like be. Right. Like that wasn't the thought. It was like, I'd be on a Wall Street board, right? Even as you say it, I'm like, that's not really like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's not really like it's not, because I still don't see myself as like the top, right? And I don't know if I ever would be.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if you'd be modest or I don't know, but it's you've managed to. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like, because you're obviously dealing in. The industry that we happen to be in is a very sort of male-dominated environment, sort of broking, and very powerful egos and very outspoken sort of type of people. And how do you manage to hold your own in this sort of environment? Hello, friends. I know you are enjoying this episode, but I'd like to ask you to do 3 things for me right now. Firstly, I'd like to subscribe to this channel. Secondly, I would like you to like this video. And thirdly, I'd like you to leave some comments in the comment section down below. Now let's get back to the episode.
Time, I think. And what I mean by that is because it's odd. Even though they're outgoing, they're outspoken and would be rude or whatever, right? It's odd to see me do that. You see what I mean? Like a white male in their 50s, mid-50s to 60s, right? Yeah. It's got to be odd to see someone as young as me, minority, you know what I mean? Like, just, like, stand, right? And come in and, like, kind of... So I would, like, just show up, I'd be at a meeting, and I'd say my piece, and if I was wrong, I'd get yelled at, and then I'm like, okay, like, whatever, but I would, like, hold, right? Okay. And I think for me, that's the trick. Like, I have a thick skin. Okay. My voice is very dominant. And it's always been that. I've always been a talker. I've always, because I'm an only child, I didn't have nobody, as soon as I see somebody, like, I was always by myself, so I was like, that's all I wanted to do, and, and I always wanted to lead. Okay. Right? Because I told you from, like, when I had my job, it was always, especially when I got to E&Y, it was like, I want to be partner. I want to be that. Okay. How do I be partner? Right. Okay. And not stay in this, and come up the ranks, right? And so when I got into private, it was like, okay, I'm in tax. How do I get to the top tax role, right? Okay. And... I had to watch and see, and that's the thing. Like, for me to get it, I had to be like them. Not exactly like them. Either, because I'm not. Like, I'm so unconventional. I feel like, even like, dealing with Big Four and doing stuff, like, they always, like, I've always gotten feedback, like, she's great, and I'm super honest, and super like, no, this is not what I want. I don't like this, I don't like that, and I think it's just like holding your own and showing up at the table, not being scared to go to the table. Okay. I think is important.
But you've also been someone that has been quite interested in helping other people. Like people come up, because we worked together for many years, and you've always sort of championed the cause of people in your team. You're always interested in their progression. Why do you have that passion?
Because people did it for me. That's why. I told you I had amazing mentors along the way that became like lifelong, friends for me.
Right.
Even like the Connor.
Yeah.
Like I still call Connor. For advice. Like up to like 2 weekends ago, I was like, I'm going through, something like, what would you do? How do I play it? And I've been super fortunate to have mentors that, and it's having mentors too is work. Right? And what I mean by that is like you have to keep in contact with them. You have to make an effort, right, to keep that relationship going. And, I'm lucky that I've had that. That I've had those, I have like my sounding board, right? Like a group of people that I can go to for different things, right? And I even have that for motherhood. I have that for for marriage. Okay. Like there's certain people like I call, like, cause when, like with marriages, ups and downs, like who would best serve me?
In this situation.
In this situation, right? Like especially, that's not like getting a divorce in Market Street.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? But like, like I'm always thinking like who's gonna whose life or whose practices or whose, behaviors am I looking for to give me that advice? Like I'm very careful on who I call for certain things, right? Because sometimes your mentors want you to do what they want you to do. Right, okay. Right? Because it's natural, right? You're like, go into tax. Like, of course I'm going to tell you to go into tax, right? Like, it's just, it's what I know, right? Okay. But, I think that's been like super important. So for me not to give back, it's like almost like I'm grateful, right? Like how ungrateful would I be if I didn't give back to other people? How ungrateful would I be if I didn't pull somebody up with me, right? Like anyone in the firm, right? Because you see like one of my staff, right? And then I have like an intern who's now like full time, and I pull her up and mentor her, and I try to make an effort. I don't do it as much as I would like to, because like with motherhood and things like that, it's busy, but anybody that asks me for help, I try. So that's why I say look for me, because I'm not going to look for you. Right. Okay. Like now with this, now I get it, right? Because I used to like kind of gripe about like senior executives, especially executives of color, like they're never around. No, it's because you're busy. Right. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you don't really have time. But each of us, and I say that like in terms of like seniority, anyone that's on your podcast, I can guarantee if a junior sends them an email, it's like, I need to pick your brain on how to do XYZ, they will take time to do it. Okay. You will find that no one will say no. No one will say no. Okay. Unless like they're really not nice. Not nice. Yeah. I was like, then you don't really want them to be a mentor. But 9 times out of 10 they'll answer. Okay.
I also know you're very very busy person by virtue of what you do. Do you have a support network around you? I mean, as a mother, you're traveling all over the world.
My parents, my husband. I mean, for sure. Like I couldn't sit at this table otherwise. I wouldn't be able to do the role that I do if I didn't have them. And I say that, even when like people like, because I'm a new mom, right? My babies are 5 and 3, so this is very new for me, right? This whole like motherhood. The other thing too, I'm an only child, so having 2 is even like, I don't understand the dynamic of fighting. Like I don't understand this like some of the stuff that they get on with, and I'm just like, why are you doing that? Like, but if I didn't have them, I couldn't do this job. Okay. Or I'd have to change it, right? In a way, right? Or I'd have to, this particular one, I don't think I could have done, right? Like I'd had to either pull back, right? Or adapt, do something different to be successful. And, someone, not recently, probably like right before I became a mom, and said to me, Cynthia, you have to understand something. You're gonna have to give up something on a day-to-day basis. So you either give up something at your job that day to give it to your kids. And you have to give up something for your kids the next day to give it to your job. But you're always going to give up something. Okay. Right? When you have children and you're working, right? As a mother, because it's not the same. We're not the same. I will never say that the man and the woman is exactly the same. It's not. The kids would always want, like, you know what I mean? Like, my kids look for me when they're sick. right? My kids, like, you know, certain things that I do, like, I think differently that way, right? Like, I plan for things, like, you know, like, because I'm OCD, so it's like, birthdays, okay, we got to get the dresses, we got to get this. It's just in my nature, right? And I think it's in a lot of mothers' nature to, you know, to instinctually to do that or to outsource it. But the thought process, the way we think as moms, it's way different than the way a father thinks. Not to say like a father is, you know, wouldn't have that, but it's just, we're just wired differently because we, like for example, right, like I breastfed both of my kids for a year each in this job.
Wow.
Right? And when I was at the office, like I had to, you know, pump. Right. So I'd have, you know, close the doors and do it. And why I bring this up is like, man doesn't have to, like, that's different, right? Right. And still maintain deliverables and still, you know, be able to give, you know what I mean? Like, so there were times like I would have to give up a meeting.
Right, okay.
To go to in person, right? Because I needed to pump. Yeah. Or like I had to give up, like my kid got sick, I had to go. Okay. See what I mean? Yeah. So it's a little bit different, and I had to make peace with that. Right? And I'm fortunate that my job is supportive
of that. Okay.
Yeah, they really are. Like I mean, like when I say like, oh, I need a minute, you know, because of the kids or whatever, they're like, fine, okay. They're super supportive in that way. Okay. But I also earn my flexibility too, right? Like I've been here so long, so it's like, so I think there's that, right? Like I gave a lot before I became a mom to this job, right?
So what's been your experience with other women at the board level? You know, because obviously sometimes, you know, we've been doing this podcast 3 months now, and I've interviewed a few people at very senior levels, and what some of them have said to me is that for women who have gotten to the boardroom, you know, they see others coming as a bit of a threat, you know, so there's a bit of some dynamics there, you know.
It's odd to me, because I do see that. Okay. I have in my career, like honestly, like as women, like I don't know why. Okay. Especially for me, right? Like nobody does my job, right? Like no one I don't like, and it's weird, like sometimes you do feel the tension. Yeah. And I know it's happened to me, and I'm like, why? Yeah. Like you can't do my job. Yeah. You don't want
Is it a territorial thing or?
Maybe. I mean, it's maybe, I don't know. But for me, like I've always, like I want more women around, right? Yeah, because there's more things for us to do. Right? I was like, there's more people to talk about the issues, right? Like if we don't, like breaking that glass ceiling for women and minority women in particular. I mean, there's so few of us like, in financial services, you know. Yeah, why not, right? Like it's kind of like, why not? And the thing about it, like now, like the market's jumpy, like meaning like. It's not like old school where you sit and you know work for years and years. Like I'm like you and I. It's way different. I know. Nobody stays at a job for 14 years. You know. Yeah. Like because even like people said, wow, they think like it's two jobs. And I'm like, no, it's the same. It's the same job. Yeah. It's the same place I've been. You know, for 14, 15 years. Yeah. And you know we're rare. Yeah. So why I say that is it's almost like as women you have to do that because they're gonna jump to something else, and you might need them to put in a word for you at that same. Like you don't know who you're gonna interview with later, right? And you might need this woman, you know, to help you. So it's like odd to me that you know, that tension exists, and I've seen it. Like it does exist. Like everything that you like from what you've interviewed, for sure.
Okay. So Cynthia, how do you define success for yourself? How do you define success for yourself? I mean, what for you is a measure of success?
You know, it's funny because I don't know. I don't look at it that way, and I think like a lot of people say like I don't look at like from perception of me, right? People think I'm successful, but I don't really think. Like because I told you, I'm always looking to the next thing, right? I'm always like, okay, what can I do for the next thing that's gonna, you know. Okay. And that's been something recently that has been weighing on me a little bit, to be candid, right? Like, what is success, right? When am I gonna feel that I'm successful, right? Like, is it gonna be when I'm ready to retire? Or is it gonna be, you know what I mean? Is it like what is that definition, right? And I think like it's always looking, like, even in this interview, like, hindsight being 2020, like I said, like, I went to Goldman. Okay, I wanted to go to Goldman. Right? And, you know, then I went to EY, and I was like, okay, I want to be partner. And then it was like, okay, well, change of gears. In order for me to be partner, I needed to come out. To go back to go being partner. You see what I mean? Like, and I never, and when I got the goal, I didn't look at it like, oh, I'm successful. It was like, oh, I got it. Okay, now I can go, you know, do whatever. So I don't know, honestly. I don't know what that definition is. Like, I don't consider myself, like, I think, yeah, I'm accomplished, and I've done things, but they're people, I'm replaceable, for sure. Like, I don't ever get that twisted in corporate America. Like, I watched a lot of people, you've seen in your career how many people like would give their souls to this job, and they would, like, within an instant, they're gone. You know, and some of the, you know, and that worries me too, being in corporate America, because you see, like, people in, you know, like, late 50s get let go, made redundant, like, all of that. And that's one thing, like, that worries me, and I always, that's why when you said, like, I don't say no, it's because, like, I take all these things, so I haven't. So I'm like, okay, you can't tell me I can't be here. unless, like, something goes royally wrong on my watch, right? So there's a little bit of that.
Okay. How do you unwind?
Danny, I have two kids. I can't unwind. There's no unwinding when I get home because they're 5 and 3. You know.
Okay.
I think probably we got a beach house like 2 years ago during the pandemic when everybody was buying like these vacation houses, and I have to say, like, that's probably the only place that I actually like turn off a bit. You know, where, and I have to make a conscious effort. I'm not gonna lie. Like, to not be on the phone. To not check emails for a couple of hours, to kind of turn off. Like, that was hard, right? And I think, like, always chasing something, for me, always made me, you know, be on, if that makes sense. So I never took unwound. But now with the girls, like I said, that concept of you have to give up something. So I have to give that up so I can watch them, right? And teach them and be, you know, a part of their life, and you know what I mean? Like, not miss things. So I think that has been like a big journey for me as a mom, like real journey, because, you know, there'd be times like when I first, both my maternity leaves, you know, I worked.
I know.
You know?
Right at the very last minute.
Both of my maternity leaves, I mean, I went to work, gave birth the next day on both of them.
Wow.
You know, even the one in pandemic, like, I was on calls, you know, that day when I was, you know, because I was waiting. You know, you go into hospital, you're waiting, so I'm like, all right, and I would answer emails and, like, you know, and then during my maternity leave, because just the way things played out, you know, and I was like a key woman, which is odd, because I remember the firm being like, we've never had a key man go on maternity leave.
All right.
Right? We've never had this happen. Like, who's gonna sign the returns if it's not you? Who's gonna, you know, sign off on these payments if it's not you? You know, so, and during that time, like, I remember, like, being like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'll do it. I'll work. Right? I'll keep going. I'll keep, you know, doesn't matter. And looking back on it, and, like, over time, like, as the girls started getting, you know, older, especially with Victoria, COVID kind of, like, just, like, changed me a bit. And I'm glad for it, like, being home and doing that. You know, and a lot of things were going on during COVID, like, with my job and things like that. Like, it was intense. But, you know, having that, spending time with them and kind of being able to shut off was a huge learning experience that I don't think I would have had if COVID didn't happen. Because, like, with my first, you know, I would, like, the baby would go to sleep at, like, 9:30 because, you know, I wouldn't see her otherwise, like, during busy season. So if I'd leave work at, like, 8 o'clock, like, I'd come home just to put her to bed. Like, they would keep her up. Right? And that was the thing. Like, otherwise I wouldn't get to, because in the morning I'd leave so early. She was sleeping already, you know, and I'd, you know, drop her off, like, to my mother, and then, you know, I'd get ready and, you know, whatever. So, like, that was hard, and I didn't look at it that way. You know what I mean? Like, at all. And then when I had Victoria, and I was home, like, I had no choice, right? I was always home. And, you know, taking time to do dinner, taking time to do that. And what was strange, it hit me, like, how was I not, like, my parents did that for me, right? They were always home, they were always feeding me, they were always, you know, around. And how was I not doing that?
Right, okay.
Right? Because you would think, like, that's how I grew up, so I would do the same with my kids, right?
Okay.
But granted, I don't cook. My mother still cooks. Like, I won't cook.
Yeah.
But she would cook every day, as she does now. I don't, and, we eat. Right? Every day. Like, we would eat. Like, even if it wasn't, like, at a table, it would be, like, in the kitchen. But she was, like, we would interact, right?
Okay.
And, being home in COVID, like, that gave me, like, a whole different perspective. To be able to kind of say, okay, like, when school started, like, I was able to pick Catherine up. I would never be able to do that. I would, because, I'd been in the city versus, her being in Queens. I would never get to do those things. And those things, like, bothered me more. Because when you're doing them, you're like, oh, man, like, I did give up. And that woman, like, it rings in my head all the time. Like, oh, I gave up all of that. For what? You know what I mean? For the job? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I didn't know that I could, like, I think any company, and this is one piece of advice I would say, they're going to take from you as much as they can, right?
Okay.
And you're going to keep giving, right? If you keep giving, they're not going to tell you, like, oh, you need to pull back. Like, stop doing that. But if you pull back, or put something for tomorrow, or prioritize in a way, nothing is going to happen.
Okay.
Do you hear what I'm saying? Like, you don't have, and I think as like minorities, especially, like, I know, like, we worry, right? The shoe is gonna drop, right? Because back home, like, whatever, right? That's just that's how we're conditioned, right? Because the shoe always drops back home, right? There was always, like, coups and all these things going on, and, like, currency going on, like, nobody had money, the banks were dry, and, they're always on the run, fires, like, all of that, right? And I think, like, we're conditioned that way, to be like, okay, we have to show face. We have to do more. We have to do more, to stay here, to belong here.
To belong here.
Right? And
one thing that you've, one theme that I'm picking up just listening to you, and I think probably will benefit our viewers, is you've not said so in so many words, but you've been flexible in some of the situations or the big events in your life. Like you're saying, you just had a baby, but then you were needed to do certain things, and you said, fine, I'll do it. How important is it, do you think, for people to have an element of flexibility? Because some people sort of have this mindset of, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do these hours, I'm going to do X amount of work, okay, fine, I might do a little bit extra, but if I'm called upon to do something out of hours. I know you work weekends if you have to and stuff like this. Things have to be done, things have to be signed. You've got global responsibility, and you just get on and do it. But some people will not do that, and I think sometimes it might hinder people's progress. I mean, what do you think about that?
It's absolutely true. Like, I don't know anybody that's at my level, C-suite, and that direct report line to the C-suite, especially in this day and age with the telephone. Like, I don't know any of them that are not on call, or like
accessible,
right? Like, I don't know anyone that doesn't do that. And I watch, like, some of the staff, like the juniors come in, like they shut off. You know what I mean? You're almost scared to look for them, right? And it's like, and which was, like, unheard of. Because before, when we were junior, right, they would look for us, and it was like,
at any time, weekends.
Take a printer to wherever, and you just did it. Now you're, like, scared to ask them to go do stuff. It's a different generation, and I think now, especially, like, I've been on a couple of panels where people would ask, is this hybrid, right, model?
Right, okay.
How, like, there's a lot of debate about it, right? Like, whether or not that basically the juniors are losing soft skills because they don't want to come into the office.
Okay.
Right? And they're not getting promoted, and they're not, And I do agree with that to a point, right? The world is changing. And AI, robotics, all this, like, I think senior management has to adapt a bit to this new style, or else it's like we have to change our management style. Because there are too many of them, and there's not enough of us, if that makes sense. Because we're going to retire, right? At the end of the day, like, we can't, to develop our staff and develop people that need to for us to hand over the torch. If this is where they're going, You know, like I mean, like it's unheard of. Like I think about, you know, my staff, like they're always on IM. Mm-hmm. They won't like call, and I'm like, can you just call? Like, and I'll call, right? Because I'm, you know, they look at me like you're old school, right? You answer, you calling me on my phone.
Yeah.
Like, you know, why can't you type it? I'm like, it's too complicated, and I don't have energy to like type.
Type, right?
And I think like we have to adapt to them. I think I don't think it's something that you know.
It's quite interesting you said that because I interviewed the Chief Operating Officer of Morgan Stanley in Portugal a few months ago, and he said the same thing. He says he picks up the phone. He said, why I don't do, you know, Teams and all these. I just pick up the phone. If I can pick up the phone and speak to somebody and get something done, you know, why type?
Because it takes so long too, and
you
then
got to think about what you're saying,
and then it's like all these acronyms, and then they don't understand. It's just like I'm like, oh, I can't get my point across, and you know, and it's my fault, right? If it comes out wrong at that point.
Yeah. So. Cool. As we prepare to wrap up this interview, how important is resilience to a person's career progression? Because obviously you've been through many cycles, and we've been through takeovers and mergers and all sorts, you know, but through it all you've portrayed or maintained a degree of resilience, you know, regardless of what sort of comes at you. How important would you say resilience is to a person's progression?
I think it's a combination of resilience and flexibility, right?
Okay.
Right? It's like both, right? Because you kind of have to be flexible. For you to be resilient, you have to be flexible, right? So going back to like your earlier question of like people who want to do 9 to 5 and kind of just do this set of hours and not be flexible, right? Mm-hmm. The only way that you can be resilient to stay relevant, right, at your job is to be flexible, right? And to be to get to that point, right? It's kind of like a give and a pull, right? In that way, and you know, people notice it. Mm-hmm. Like I can tell you too, probably like as an executive, right? You do notice the staff that goes above and beyond.
Absolutely, yeah.
You look at the outliers and then you try to give them more things, right? Because you need to do different things, so you give them more projects. You absolutely, I think, look at that, and you tend to gravitate towards them, right? Which goes back to the whole thing with networking, right? You mentor people that remind you of you.
Okay.
Right? Which is why it was so hard, I think, for us as minorities to get, you know, mentorship, right?
Okay.
Because we don't have anything in common.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We don't have anything in common. I don't care what anybody says. We don't have anything in common with a white man that's Ivy League. That's in the upper class.
Okay.
Right? Like a lot of us do not have that in common with them. So why? So they look at us like why? Why would they, you know, mentor us, right? It's not natural. And even when my mentorships, like you ask me like why, you know, I mentor people that I look at that are like me. That have certain qualities like me too, like that resilience and flexibility and things like that. So I say that like it's super important to have that because it's a full circle, right?
Okay.
Like my mentality, like I would mentor you. Right. If you're not resilient, and you're not, you know what I mean. You're not here, and you're just kind of going that pace. Like you're not. We have nothing in common.
Okay.
Right, because I don't move that way.
Right.
And I think that's mentorship is like hard that way, and I think a lot of people, entry level like juniors, don't realize that. Right, like if you want to mentor, you have to be like them.
Yeah.
For them to want to have this organic, right, like relationship with you, and it has to grow organically. Like it can't be forced, right? Because like it just doesn't work.
You did say,
You know.
Yeah. Good. So what do you think about this podcast and what we're trying to do? And I spoke to you a few days and ran it by you and said, fine, why not? I mean, what are your thoughts about it?
I think it's an amazing thing to do because I think a lot of us don't know each other. Like, we know each other, right? But not really, especially on a global basis.
Yeah.
Like, the people that you showcase, like, I would have never, like, seen them to have that conversation. And they're probably saying the same thing about me when you put mine out, right?
Yeah.
And I think you should, like, definitely, like, expand it, like, in the U.S. and things. Because there's so many successful minorities in the U.S. That I feel like don't get... Like they do, but like in their industry or something, or like some event, but not like this, not like in a, you know, right. And all of us, I you know, in watching the podcast, and all of us had something similar. Like none of us came with a silver spoon in the mouth. None of us grew up in corporate. None of us, right? Like it's different. Like for example, like when our kids, right, want to go to work in corporate, we can call. right? Nobody called
for us.
Right? There was nobody to call, right? Like, we can call the people that we know at Goldman and Morgan Stanley and things like that. And it's like, hey, you know, my son is looking or my daughter's looking for a job. Or I have a friend that has a daughter that needs an internship. Could you help me? We didn't have nobody. You know? So that's different.
Fantastic. Anyway, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, Cynthia. And if you've enjoyed this episode, I would like you to do 3 things for me. I'd like you to leave some comments in the comment section below. Secondly, I'd like you to like this video. It's very important. For us to grow this platform, we need likes. And then thirdly, I'd like you to subscribe to this channel. Because as I said earlier, we're trying to grow and build a platform. It takes a lot of effort. You might not realize, but it takes a lot of effort to get, to even have access to people who've succeeded. And what you can do to help us to have credibility and depth and width is for you to like, comment, share, and subscribe. So thank you very much, and see you next week. Thank you very much, Cynthia.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm giving you a hug.
Well, why not?